Tonight at 10, ambulance waiting times and delays hit a record high. Long queues outside hospitals. Last week, more than 11,000 people in England were waiting in ambulances outside A&E.
We come in that morning at 9 o'clock and we were queuing then, and there was no bed space at 9 in the morning.
You see a time come up on the call and it's hours ago and you're thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to turn up to? And they're kind of in a really bad state.
We'll be asking how difficult it will be to reduce ambulance delays, also on the programme tonight. The royal visit to Boston overshadowed after Prince William's godmother challenged a black British charity campaigner over where she really came from.
No one sees what's happening behind the closed doors.
Now adding to the strain, Prince Harry and Meghan give the first glimpse of their documentary out next week.
I had to do everything I could to protect my family.
Extraordinary scenes in Qatar as Japan beats Spain, though both go through, and Germany crash out of the World Cup despite beating Costa Rica.
Hello, I'm Rob.
And former rugby league player Rob Burrow, who has motor neuron disease, is to read the CBeebies bedtime story using a voice computer.
On BBC London, a former London firefighter who called out the brigade's toxic culture tells us why he wouldn't recommend the career to black or female Londoners.
Good evening. Long ambulance delays, long queues outside A&E once you finally arrive at hospital, and yet more queues inside as paramedics wait to hand patients over. That is what happened to thousands of people last week as ambulance waits hit their worst levels on record. 1 in 7 ambulances in England queued for over an hour outside hospitals to hand over patients to A&E. The target is 15 minutes, and that's the highest figure since records began in 2010. One of the hold-ups is that more than 13,000 beds a day are occupied by people who are medically fit to be discharged but don't have anywhere suitable to go. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, spent the day with the South Central Ambulance Service. Here's his report.
Cat 53-year-old female, she's saying, help me.
And we think she might have abdominal pain, but the call handlers are struggling to understand her. So we'll see when we get there.
Joe and Nick are on their way to a patient in Milton Keynes.
Ambulance service.
Diana is in severe pain and has been vomiting, possibly linked to an earlier operation. It's a Category 2 call, a serious condition requiring urgent assessment.
We'll take good care of you, all right?
She needs to get to A&E.
We need to find some space for you.
But inside the city's hospital, there's a queue building up. Paramedics are having to wait to hand over patients. It's a familiar scene for Joe and Nick as they move Diana into the emergency department.
What's happening, Joe?
So I've just spoken to the nurses. They know that we're here, and they just asked us just to wait in the queue until they have space available. So until then, we don't know what's going on.
A&E is crowded because beds are hard to find in the hospital. Waits like this are part of everyday life for patients and paramedics.
We come in that morning at 9 o'clock and we were queuing then, and there was no bed space at 9 in the morning, and that's the start of a normal weekday. And you'll hear calls going out for assistance for other crews and you can't get to them. And that's the frustrating bit, when you can't get back out and help colleagues.
It does get tricky when you see a time come up on the call and it's hours ago and you're thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to turn up to? And they're kind of in a really bad state. But we do try our best to get to everyone. Obviously, when your person's in need, you want them to get the help they can. And obviously they do get the help, but the wait time is kind of a massive contribution.
I think we're tired most of the time. You know, you come to work tired, go home tired, and you do it all again the next day. But, you know, we keep smiling, as I say, and we just keep going. It's what it is.
So, yeah, so if the front crew go into A, happy days. And then you can take this patient, my patient, the next patient, who hopefully this trolley will be for.
Joe, who's a senior paramedic, is helping speed things up. He allocates one crew to look after a few patients, allowing others to take new call-outs.
November Alpha 332, receive him.
Control to November Alpha 332, thank you. Just sent you down a Category 2.
After a half-hour wait, Joe and Nick handed over their patient. It should have taken just 15 minutes. The aim where possible is to get patients treated at home. Better for them, and it eases pressure on hospitals.
George, lovely to meet you. My name's Joe, this is Nick.
George, who's 83, has a temperature and back pain and feels shaky.
I just need to put some stickers on your wrists and ankles and on and around your left side of your chest.
Joe does tests and diagnoses a chest infection which needs an antibiotic and a steroid. To get a prescription requires a call to a local GP surgery.
Thank you for holding. We are very busy at the moment. Please continue to hold and your call will be answered as soon as possible.
Sometimes there's a priority line to call, but not today.
So I'm having to call the normal number, which all I'm getting back is user busy. So it means we have to wait a little while until we can get through to the receptionist. So we're just a little bit stuck at the moment with doing that.
That wait to sort out the medication with the GP added nearly an hour to what the call might have taken. It may be unusual, but it certainly means delays getting the crew back on the road. Looking ahead, how difficult will things be this winter?
Very serious. I think this winter is going to cause all sorts of issues. We will continue to work tirelessly as a system with all our partners to see what else we can do.
Back out with Joe. He's nearing the end of his shift.
Before I came into the service and when I was growing up, I don't think I quite realised that delays would even be a thing, really. You know, we're an emergency service, we should be there to attend emergencies.
But ultimately, do you still love the job and the challenges?
Yeah, I do. I couldn't imagine doing any other job.
Hugh Pym, BBC News, Milton Keynes.
Our health correspondent Catherine Burns is here, and we hear there from the ambulance crews and their experiences. It does tell a wider picture of what is happening in hospitals.
Absolutely. Sophie, the best way really to think about this is to imagine ambulances as the beginning of a journey through the NHS system. So let's start with those record high numbers from last week. 11,000 patients in ambulances in England waiting outside of hospitals. Really, imagine it, basically they were stuck outside the front door, A&E, because they were just too busy to let them in. Once they were inside, the waits are not over. Last month, 150,000 patients were waiting longer than the target of 4 hours to be admitted to a ward. Now, generally, that was down to struggles finding them beds, which is obviously linked to blockages elsewhere in the system. Because what we find at the minute is that more than half of patients in hospitals in England who are well enough to go home stay in hospital because of problems getting the care they need when they leave. So you can see that ambulances are actually a really good way of looking at the pressures across the whole of the system.
And the worry about these delays is that people could end up dying.
Absolutely. There is growing concern about this. At the moment in England and Wales, we're generally seeing several hundred more people dying every week than we would normally expect. And that is being linked to the situation in emergency care.
Somewhere between 900 and 1,500 excess deaths compared to the 5-year average. We're not quite sure what causes that, but we believe that the problems with accessing urgent and emergency care is contributing to probably a quarter or a third of this.
Now, other things are being linked to these higher numbers, not least COVID. We are frailer as a population because of it. And obviously, during the pandemic, people were waiting for longer to get the help they needed. So it's really hard to say how many of these extra deaths are being linked to those problems we spoke about at hospital front doors. But we can be certain this is killing some people.
How can they go about reducing the queues?
Well, the government says it's got a long-term plan for emergency care that will come out in the new year. This winter, it's spending £500 million in England to unclog the system. Tonight, the Prime Minister said he wants to sit down soon with NHS bosses to talk through these issues.
Now what I want to make sure is that extra funding that we're putting in is actually going to make a difference on the ground, improve the quality of care people get, make sure that they get that care as quickly as possible. We've put the money in, now we need to see the results, and that's what I'm going to focus on delivering.
Really, Sophie, there are no quick fixes here, though, and this is just the start of winter. Let's not forget either that we're expecting some health workers to walk out on strike in the coming weeks.
Catherine Burns, thank you. And if you have experienced very long waits for an ambulance or at A&E and want to tell us your story, do get in touch as part of our focus on the NHS under pressure. You can email us at haveyoursay@bbc.co.uk. A black British charity campaigner who was repeatedly asked at a royal reception where she was really from by a senior figure in the royal household has described her experience as abuse. Ngozi Fulani was questioned about her background by Lady Susan Hussey, Prince William's godmother and the late Queen's lady-in-waiting at Buckingham Palace on Tuesday. It comes as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex prepare to release their documentary next week in what they say is the inside story of why they stepped away from royal duties. Our Raw correspondent Sarah Campbell reports.
I'm very clear, right? No matter how uncomfortable it is for other people to accept, I'm very clear that I experienced racism in an environment that I should have felt safe in, and we need to address that.
Ngozi Fulani was invited along with 300 other guests to a reception at Buckingham Palace, highlighting the issue of violence against women. Here she is seen being warmly greeted by the Queen Consort. But earlier, she says she'd received a very different welcome from a senior palace aide, Lady Susan Hussey.
When the lady first approached me, one of the first things she did was to take my locks and move it out of the way. No conversation at first, and then she says, I just want to see your name back.
Ms Fulani, born in Britain, then says she was repeatedly and aggressively questioned.
I'm from here, I was born here. Yeah, but where are you really from? I'm really from here. Yeah, but okay, so I can see that this is going to be a bit of a challenge. She said, what's your nationality? And I said, lady, I was born here, I'm British. I was thinking that would be the end of it. No.
Lady Susan Hussey, seen here in blue, was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth for 6 decades. Yesterday, she resigned from her honorary role within the royal household and offered her profound apologies for the hurt caused. Lady Hussey is also Prince William's godmother. Today, the royal couple's visits to the US city of Boston continued. The headlines were supposed to be about his Earthshot Prize, the award he founded for environmental innovations. But instead, accusations of racism have had once again to be addressed. And today, the promise of more royal revelations.
No one sees what's happening behind the closed doors.
Netflix released the first look at its 6-part series starring the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which will, according to the streaming giant,
when the stakes are this high, doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
Look at the challenges which forced them to step back as senior royals. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
There's a call for more youth workers specialising in so-called county lines after a number of teenage stabbings across the country over the past week. County lines involve organised criminal groups using mobile phones to move and supply drugs, usually from cities into smaller towns and rural areas. The latest figures suggest a large rise in the number of children being trafficked and used for organised crime. Our correspondent Jeremy Cook has spent months following an organisation in the northeast, Edge Northeast, in Newcastle that saves and rescues children groomed by criminal gangs to see the devastating effect it has on young people and their families.
2 teenagers have died after being stabbed just a mile apart from each other.
This is a story of children caught up in a world of violence and tragedy.
He's my little boy and I can't protect him and he's out there. It's breaking the family apart.
It's the story of one organisation battling to reach kids in the gravest danger.
As long as they can line their own pockets with money, they don't care who they use. And it ruins these young people's lives.
Fighting to save children from criminal gangs.
If we let our guard down for a minute, somebody's going to come in and grab them.
County Lines is all about drug dealing, organised crime gangs using children to move cocaine, crack, whatever, all over the country.
Years ago, you just wouldn't think about using a kid to run drugs, but now they don't care who they use. It is heartbreaking.
No answer. Yeah, I'm really worried now.
We've been given exclusive access to Edge Northeast, a small team with one clear mission: to save children from the gangs.
What time did you last text you?
About midnight.
How old is she?
15.
Right now, it's Lorna dealing with an immediate crisis: a missing teenage girl.
Thanks, bye.
She is vulnerable, isn't she?
She's very vulnerable.
This is where it gets serious.
I'm scared I'm going to lose her.
Lose her to the gangs, to exploitation, to being sent on trains, buses, any transportation to anywhere in the country. That's what happened to Nicole.
I think at the point I realised I wasn't going to get anything, it was too late. I was already well and truly in it and doing it, and there was no choice in it. There was no, I can decide when I was going to do it or where I was going to do it. It was they would tell me and I was doing it. If I wasn't doing it, I would pay for it and I would know about it.
And that's all that's left really is the memory of him.
Another sad street memorial to another young life lost. Reports this week from across the country of more stabbings, more deaths.
I feel absolutely gutted. We need more people out there on the streets to help these kids, you know, to get them to understand and to teach them and to get them back on track. It's nowhere to live.
It sounds odd, but for some young people, being arrested can be a turning point, an opportunity for youth workers to make first contact.
There are 10 cells along this corridor set aside for what they call juveniles, for children. And behind this door is a young person who's in police custody.
Like others on the Edge team, Lorna's own life experience, her own troubled youth, can help make vital connections.
If you were in the custody, you were talking to your young self, what would you say?
I'm getting a bit emotional. That someone did care. And that my life didn't have to be like that.
The government says that thousands of county lines have been dismantled. It's becoming a priority for many police forces.
Some of these organisations are massive. They are so geared up to recruiting these young people with vulnerabilities. And not only is it about the drugs and the violence, it's about that. It's about the life-ruining effect. So if they're listening, they are not safe. Northumbria Police will absolutely pursue them and will get justice.
Edge is all about keeping kids safe, helping their families too, like this mum we'll call Sarah, worried sick about her missing teenage son.
Do you know where he is now?
No, I don't. And that's the worrying part, not knowing if he's alive or dead. It's not his kind of choice. He cannot, if somebody says to him, right, I want you here, there, or this time, that time, he has to be there, or else there's repercussions on the family.
Imagine it was your child.
What's it doing to you?
Killing us. It's really, really hard. He's my little boy and I can't protect him and he's out there. It's breaking the family apart.
For Chris, a check-in at the beach with Jason.
I'm not going to allow anyone to cast you adrift either.
Keeping him on track.
Small steps actually are like massively important.
Long-term support.
The situations where I've either been arrested and I've been in a holding cell, they've called my dad. My dad's not turned up. They've called social worker. My social worker's off work, so he ain't coming. Without even having to ask, Chris has just turned up.
If you want to say something to Chris, what would you say to him?
Thank you, innit? Being a father figure, an uncle figure, a big brother, friend, best friend. I can't lie, thank you, innit? You've helped.
These children need all the help they can get. For Nicole, it's still hard to believe what the gangs do to children, what they did to her.
Not words for them, you know. I don't wish, I couldn't think of anything worse. I wish on them people, to be fair. Because it's so self-centred of them to know that they're young, naive kids that don't genuinely at that age don't know any better.
With intervention, with ongoing support, young lives can be turned around. But Mum Sarah is still waiting for her son to come home. He's already been missing more than 50 times this year. And tonight, he's still out there, somewhere. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Newcastle.
And that report was produced by Claire Kendall and filmed by camera journalist Steve Fylde, who have spent months following that story. If you want details of organisations that offer advice and support with county lines and modern-day slavery, you can go online to bbc.co.uk/actionline. A look now at some other stories making the news today. House prices have seen their biggest monthly fall for nearly 2.5 years, according to the Nationwide Building Society. Their data showed the cost of a home dropped by 1.4% in November, with the average house price now £273,000. Nationwide said fallout from the mini-budget and interest rates on new mortgages had played a part. The clothing brand Joules has been bought by rival Next and the company's founder, Tom Joule. 19 of its 124 stores will close and 133 jobs are being cut, but most staff will be able to remain in a deal worth over £40 million. A pilot scheme to allow journalists to report what happens in some family courts is to be introduced in the UK. Family courts have powers such as ordering children to be taken into care. The 12-month pilot will take place in Leeds, Cardiff and Carlisle. The identity of families involved will not be reportable. It's been a night of high drama in Qatar as Germany crashed out of the World Cup despite beating Costa Rica 4-2. And there was more drama as Japan beat Spain, though both do go through to the knockout rounds. Our sports correspondent Nesta McGregor was watching and sent us this report.
Starting the group tonight in fourth, Germany were trying to avoid going home at the group stage for only the third time. But for the second World Cup running, the first order of business was beat Costa. When they took the lead, the noise was deafening.
It's in!
A game full of drama then took another. In the end, the win required, but it wasn't enough. Instead of tickets to the knockout stages, they'd be booking seats for the flight home. The reason the win proved to be of no significance: by beating Spain, Japan topped the group as both teams progressed to the last 16. Qatar 2022 promised to be a World Cup like no other, on and off the field. That's proving to be the case. Remember, Germany went out at the group stage in Russia 4 years ago. That's been repeated tonight. 4 times winners of this trophy. But fans we spoke to after the game are calling for changes to the team and the management. Of course, not the only shock today, because Belgium, the second-ranked team in the tournament, are also out. Morocco and Croatia progressing from Group F. This stadium is in the middle of a desert. What we witnessed tonight, some fans might wish was a mirage. Back to you.
Nesta McGregor, thank you. Well, definitely not a good night for Germany, but it was a night of history for one woman as she became the first female referee to take charge of a men's World Cup game. Stéphanie Frappart from France led a team of 3 women officials at the Germany-Costa Rica match. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott reports.
After years of climbing the refereeing ranks, tonight came a significant step for female. She was ready for the opportunity and the scrutiny.
The World Cup, Men's World Cup, is the most important competition in the world, not only in football. So we know that there is a lot of expectations. There was always pressure. There are always pressure in the matches. And also when you are a woman, you have more pressure.
But how comfortable did she feel that this milestone was coming in Qatar, a country criticised for its record on women's rights?
It's not me who decided this World Cup. When you are selected for the World Cup, how we can say that I'm not going? We know that there is some difficulty there for the women, but I think and I hope this World Cup will help them.
Who played their part in an action-packed match. After a night of fluctuating fortunes and more than 100 minutes played, Frappart called time on a memorable moment in World Cup history, in more ways than one. Laura Scott, BBC News.
Cricket now, and there was a stunning performance from England on the first day of the first test against Pakistan in Rawalpindi. They ended the day on 506 for 4, the first time 500 runs have been scored on the first day of a test match. 4 players each managed to clock up a century, also a record for day one. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson reports.
Rawalpindi, after 17 years of waiting, one day of record breaking. England began with Ben Duckett's touches. And the crashes from Zach Crawley's bat. Welcome England, read the sign. Oh, they were delighted to be there. Crawley with the first century. On your feet in the dressing room, and why sit down? The runs, the records, the celebrations kept coming. Key factors: helpful conditions, England's bold ambition and some questionable fielding. Duckett made 107. Then it was Ollie Pope's chance. Another fluently forceful innings. Another 100. Yeah, him too. Yet the most dismissive batting only came now. Harry Brook hit 1 over for 24 on his way to a century. 400 makers on the first day of a test match. 506 runs. Astonishing records. England are back in Pakistan but playing as they've never done before. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
And finally, the bedtime story on the BBC Children's channel CBeebies is well known for its famous guest readers. Now, the former rugby league player Rob Burrow, who has motor neuron disease, is taking on the accolade. Rob has recorded a story using a computerised voice machine, which is controlled by his eyes and recreates the words in his own Yorkshire accent. He said he's excited and honoured to be taking part. Graham Satchell reports.
Jackson! And now Guy.
Rob Burrow with his family at the CBeebies studio. He's here to record a bedtime story with a little help from his daughter Maya.
Dad, remember big smile. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action!
CBeebies Bedtime Story.
Hello, I'm Rob. I can't use my voice in the way that maybe you can, which is why I use this computer to talk for me. It's called an eye gaze. I use my eyes to gaze or look at the words and it speaks for me. It's like magic.
Watching at home in Sunderland, Lucy and her mum, Jo. Lucy has cerebral palsy and also uses a computer to help her communicate.
I used to play rugby as my job, but something happened that made my world go upside down. But I was brave and didn't give up.
Rob is reading a book called Tilda Tries Again. It tells the story of a little girl whose world unexpectedly turns upside down. Tilda sees a ladybird stuck on its back.
Then the ladybird tried again, and again, and again, until at last it flew free. Tilda thought about this. The ladybird hadn't given up, so neither would she.
Lucy used her device to tell us what she thought.
I feel happy. I feel happy Rob is reading CBeebies Bedtime Story.
Lucy's grown up watching the bedtime story and never until now has she seen herself represented in that way.
It helps to generate awareness. I think it helps to generate a real understanding about the technological advancements that we've seen and the real benefit that that is bringing for disabled people.
Wasn't until the brave, even though at times things felt a little topsy-turvy and she wanted to give up, she didn't. She just kept on trying. Night, night.
And if you want to see Rob read his CBeebies bedtime story, you can see it in full this weekend. It's on at 10 to 7 on Saturday night. Right now, though, we have Ben Rich with all the latest weather. Ben.
Hi, Sophie. Thank you. Good evening. The 1st of December is the first day of the meteorological winter and a perfect time to look back at the autumn. What do the statistics show? Well, this chart, whenever you see blue, that shows that there's been more rain than normal. It has been a particularly wet autumn for most of us and also a particularly warm autumn. In fact, the 3rd warmest autumn on record. It keeps us on course for 2022 potentially to be the warmest year on record. The only thing that could prevent that would be a very cold December. December certainly started on a cold note where we kept fog all day long. Parts of Wiltshire, for example, only getting to 3 degrees. And through tonight, that fog continuing to affect parts of the West Country, East Wales, the Midlands, but other areas too, seeing some very murky conditions, quite poor if you have to travel on the roads. Temperatures generally holding above freezing, but if you see clear skies for any length of time, maybe dropping just below. So into tomorrow, some of that fog across central and southern parts, but it should start to lift and clear. More of a breeze turning that fog over, giving a little more in the way of sunshine. Now, that said, Northern England and Scotland will likely stay quite cloudy with some spots of drizzle. Northern Ireland should see some sunshine, a few showers easing into eastern parts of England. Temperatures generally between 6 and 11 degrees. Now for the weekend, we will have a chilly easterly breeze. There'll be a lot of cloud. Because of the strength of the breeze, not as much fog, but there will be some bits and pieces of showery rain here and there. And then let me show you what happens next week. It looks very likely that we'll see cold air plunging down from the south. You really will notice that, a chilly feel. There could be some wintry showers. Sophie.
Ben, thank you very much. And that is it from us on Thursday, the 1st of December. Newsnight with Kirsty Walker is just getting underway on BBC Two. The news continues here, though, on BBC One, as it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. From us